So this is the Women's General Counsel cohort. It is one of my favorite days of the quarter. Today, we're going to talk, as we always do, about the role of the General Counsel, but in particular, as we navigate through, and you navigate through very challenging times, which Lisa deemed the permacrisis now and going forward, and you really as the guiding light for the company. And I am going to ask if I may indulge you for just a moment, and as I introduce myself, and then the outstanding panelists who've joined us today will introduce themselves. So just a brief word about Baker Botts for those who may not be familiar. We are a global law firm. We focus in two sectors in particular, and arguably a third, which is the intersection between those two: tech, energy, and energy transition. And for my part, I have a business role with the firm. I am the only person who is not a lawyer participating in this group today. And I want to tell you a little bit about, because we are all women making change in our communities and in our companies, that I'm proud to say that Baker Botts really does happily outperform the market, in that the leaders at the firm of our largest departments, they are all women. Our executive committee, which is synonymous with more or less a board of a company, is 45% women. And many of those women spend a lot of time in boardrooms. And so do I. I have the privilege of serving on a number of boards and as an advisory board member to both for-profit and nonprofit companies. So as for the people that you're here to hear from, I would like to start with some introductions. And I think we'll start with our participant who is the furthest flung from where I sit here in quite sunny Sausalito, Elizabeth Matthews. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm the general counsel of the Bristow Group, and also head of government affairs and insurance. If you're not familiar with Bristow Group, we're a helicopter company. We provide services to offshore oil and gas operations, and also search and rescue operations to different governments around the world. I also serve on several boards. I'm on the board of the World Affairs Council of Houston, the American Hospital of Paris Foundation, the Texas General Counsel Forum, and the Institute for Energy Law. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Diane, over to you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Diane Honda, and I am the Chief Administrative Officer, General Counsel, and Secretary at Barracuda Networks. Barracuda is a global cybersecurity company, and in my responsibilities, I have our global legal, compliance, risk management, and human resources functions. As part of this, I've been responsible for the strategy and operations of our information security, data privacy, and all of our facilities worldwide. And on the HR side, I also lead all aspects of our employee engagement, talent management, and leadership development programs. I've been with Barracuda for 11 years, so I've been through an IPO, 2 sales to private companies, and it has been, quite an opportunity for me to, see the GC role that I started with expand over that time. I also sit on 2 board of directors, one public company, the Hillman Group, and a private company as well, LucidWorks. And I really focus on governance, people, and cybersecurity matters on those boards. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Diane. And in your introduction, I am always, I'm blessed to have known you for a long time. I'm always inspired and also really tired when I think about all the different roles that you play. But all kidding aside, one of the many reasons we asked you to join the panel today is that it is my view that you are a visible symbol and representative of a very significant and awesome trend among women lawyers who serve in-house, where And to be crystal clear, serving as the general counsel, chief legal officer is in and of itself critically important and plenty to do. The trend I wanted to note, however, is that we see more and more people like you who are taking on those chief administrative roles, and whether it's human resources, government affairs, physical security, a host of other areas. And we see this happening, and we can look to many of our friends, particularly here in the Bay Area, who have taken on president of the organization. And, Amy Weaver is a fun example at Salesforce. Who knew? It turns out you all can be CFOs as well. So I just wanted to note that I have a goal, which is to actually, next time I'm with you, be more specific about the actual trends in how your roles have evolving. I'm dipping into some resources so that we can actually put a number on that. It also impacts, I believe, compensation for all of you, and it's something we should share to support one another. Related to that, we see more and more women who are lawyers, general counsels, serving on boards and serving for the first time as an independent director. And we see that trend. I think it's about 4x than it was 10 years ago, but I want to come to you with data. So that is a commitment I make to all of you. Pardon the sidestep over to another person who I don't know how you do it all. Michelle, would you introduce yourself now?
Absolutely, Catherine. Thank you so much. Great points. So I'm Michelle Kuchi. I'm a lawyer, a serial entrepreneur, and founder of and managing partner of Digital DX Ventures. We're an investor in early stage AI and data-enabled healthcare. And as a result of my role, I'm on multiple boards, which include GLX, Biosha, NowDX, Delphi, Nefersan, Optina, and a PE board for Fox Payne and previously public company insurance board. And I'm happy to be here and share whatever I can to help these amazing women be on more boards. We need you.
Yes, we need you. And as I mentioned at the top, there are quite a few sitting directors who have joined us for this program this morning. And there's so many of you who are board ready and or thinking about projecting out your goal, which professional development goals, which include serving as a director. And we welcome all of you and welcome your participation. This program, for those of you who have joined us in the past, we will often do a substantive panel, and then we will break out into groups. We've chosen not to do the breakout today, and we have reserved a pretty good amount of time for dialogue towards the end of our hour together. So with that, I am going to read a statement and then turn it over to the panel for their beginning of their observations and recommendations to all of us. So as Lisa wrote, it's clear that in this time of permacrisis, which she puts in quotes, facing most public and private companies, the role of the general counsel is evolving exponentially. With the new constantly changing regulatory and technology advancements, as well as shifts in geopolitical, indeed, and social dynamics, it's an important time for this group, all of you. And we want to discuss what the panel believes are the changing roles, and to the extent you believe there are new expectations of you as a general counsel and as a director, we would like to hear from you about what you see or believe those new expectations are. And in no particular order, but I am going to start with you, Diane.
Sure. And I think you said it really well when you sort of summarized that the role has evolved. And I'm one example. There are many other out there. And for me, it's evolved from what was more thought of as a traditional legal advisor to really more of a business partner and strategist. And so, we all talk about becoming a trusted advisor and being able to navigate sort of through the changing landscape and kind of moving the forward company. And for me, I think about the soft skills that make a really highly effective general counsel are also the skills that make a really highly effective leader, right? So having a strong business acumen, good judgment, forward-thinking collaboration, right? Like that's a much much more important skill now, I think, for a GC than it was before. I also think when I think about sort of the HR hat I put on, that coaching and leading others and being able to do that in a way that kind of brings people along, that's another skill that GCs are particularly strong at, right? And then just thinking through an end-to-end solution and what needs to really be done at each step of the way. And each of those skills transfer incredibly well to other functions. And, one that comes to mind for me, right, is, I managed our information security, all of our data privacy, and the CISO reporting to me, right? That is an area more and more so that has gotten more compliance and regulatory focused. And a lot of the skills that you use as a GC, you can use to help guide the company through the challenges related to that. HR is another area, right? Hiring and pay transparency. They've evolved now to have much more controls, I would say, or just requirements around an HR team. And yet you need to have this policy-driven approach that also is very employee focused and balanced, right? And again, I just think the innate approach of each of us as GCs to, quickly assess and balance various factors just fits naturally into these other functional areas. So, to me, that's really sort of in an essence of how I think the role has expanded and changed, and how I think it will continue to, and how our skills are just the perfect fit to take on those broader roles.
I agree, the perfect fit to take on the broader roles. So I think Elizabeth would appreciate your sharing your perspectives next.
Yes, I agree with everything Diane said. I think that the GC role has really evolved from being a deep specialist legal advisor to being an advisor on all sorts of issues to the CEO and to the board as well. I feel like GCs are asked to advise on everything from HR matters to government relations to insurance, like I'm handling. And I think you're just sort of a person that's seen as sitting at the side of the CEO and advising the board on whatever issues come up. And as so many businesses are transitioning and really evolving, your thoughts on strategy and risk are really critical.
Agreed. Elizabeth, as you were speaking, I was picturing a observation that I have been around boardrooms for a while now, including being familiar with many of the clients. And I sometimes will ask the chief legal officer where she sits in the boardroom. And she often now sits next to the CEO. And I think it is certainly that is not scientific, but I think this literal being the number 2 within the organization as a trusted advisor is something, or I should say the first stop for any issue. Setting aside any legal issue is something that I have observed over time, and thinking of you as an example of that. Michelle, where to begin as things have evolved with your different hats on?
Well, just specifically for your question of the evolving role of the general counsel, and it does, I echo, I mean, Diane was, hit them all those in, and Elizabeth added, so I'll just add 2 or 3 things that I noted, or that I've seen that have been increasingly important to receive from our general counsels. And one is, I think general counsels are more tasked with global thinking than they ever were before, because there are ramifications to everything. When we saw during the pandemic, it created supply chain issues. We never thought we'd have problems getting toilet paper or renting a car. But the world is a global world these days, and so I find that the role requires a lot more global thinking and seeing around corners. And you talk about having the general counsel sit next to the CEO. I think that given the level of sensitivities we have around social issues, around work at home, around everything, I think it's almost, you sort of have to be the protection arm of the company and the CEO. You have to just be the shield in so many of these things, because I don't think that a lot of the sensitivities could be generational, and sometimes the CEO is of a generation that's not as sensitive to something that a new generation would be sensitive to, oftentimes their customers. So I think there is a really important role to be that shield and that filter through which CEOs deliver their message to ensure that, you know, it's not going to be something that's missed, right? And that could be construed in a different way. So I think it's a much more expanded and frankly, more substantive role than ever before, right?
I agree. And there you are actually modeling for us some of those soft skills that Diane was talking about. And I find that working with people like you have an ability to articulate sort of challenging and sensitive issues in a way that it opens up the dialogue as opposed to closing it down, just the way that you touched on some of the sensitivities of a generational gap that may exist in understanding how people are motivated by way of example. So one of the commitments that NACD makes to all of you is to give you tactical and concrete examples of how to do your jobs well, so you take something away from this morning. And so we've decided to take this question and go a level deeper. And so each panel member is now going to go deeper on a specific area where you have been called upon and you believe others are called upon, these sort of new expectations. And Elizabeth, we're starting with you, and we gave you a really big remit where we asked you to talk about sort of the transformation, and I called it air mobility. I don't know if that's a thing, I sort of made it up, but the energy transition and ESG, the new expectations around those subjects.
That's right. So, you know, my company, like many, as part of the energy transition, is looking at what do we want to look like in, 10, 20, 30 years. And, we have a long and proud history of, being a helicopter company. But I think as we move forward, you're going to be looking at, perhaps electric helicopters or, greener types of transportation. And so, being a GC in this time is really important, because as you're making a fundamental change in your business, it's so important to be aware of the risks and also the strategic possibilities that come with a significant change like this. I came from the energy industry to Bristow Group, so I spent 20 years at energy companies, Chevron, and then Total Energies. And those companies as well, as a GC, at least for Total, I was involved with the energy transition there. How do you move from being a traditional oil and gas company to really being a multi-energy company in which solar and biofuels and wind is a large part of your portfolio? And of course, being a general counsel or a legal advisor there is so critical, because all of those fundamental changes in the business come with significant risks. And so I think, the role of the GC is just even more important as you evolve your business.
Elizabeth, if I ask a follow-up question, fair to say that although energy transition, of course, was core to your areas of responsibility at Total and Chevron, though every company needs to have its sort of strategy around energy transition, and whether you're a technology company or a e-commerce, I mean, we all need to have them. Would you say that we should all be thinking about that?
Absolutely. I think it's a fundamental change in many businesses that you really have to be thinking about how do you operate in a less carbon intensive way, and a greener way.
Yes, and you're being asked to, I think, report on those things more rigorously, so your jobs expand. So Michelle, we asked you if you would do a deep dive on an area that you spend a lot of your CEO and other business advisory time on in board service as well. On, we said AI and technology generally. What are the new expectations? AI.
Yeah, again, that's like a definitely not a 1 to 2 minute conversation, but I will try and high level it. The way I think about it is I think about issues that are internal facing to the company and issues that are external facing to the company. And so when I talk about internal, how do we address what's going on internally? We have generative AI that's creating, potentially sensitive information going outside the company. How are we using, so it's leaking, that kind of stuff. We have to have guidelines around that, but it's also at the same time improving processes, right? And we're using, technology for HR, for customer acquisition, for marketing, for financials. So we're trying to increase our productivity while also protecting our IP, our privacy, our data. And so I think there's a number of issues with respect to that internal facing piece that need a lot of oversight, and provide a lot of opportunity also. And then on the external facing, how do we address what's going externally? So you have all of the customer facing, pieces. You have all the integrating of partnerships that can create cybersecurity issues. You have, growth, right? Innovation and competing in a world market where, different technologies are used. So if you talk about, cybersecurity, digitalization, innovation, those are all areas that need addressing both internally and externally. But the exciting part is that if, the proper use of technology to really enable companies to compete in ways they never did, or identify opportunities they would never have had access to, I think is incredibly exciting, but definitely needs a ton of guardrails. And I think that's the role that, the general counsels are excellent providing.
Michelle, I want to ask you a question that I didn't prepare you for. If one of the participants today is sitting at a company or perhaps advising a company or serving on their board where they feel, I'm going to call it being ruled by fear, and their reaction to the advent or explosion of AI as a thing, that people have said, just don't touch it. And I am aware of some organizations, and by the way, law firms have some really cool and important questions to answer about this subject, or not answer, but to navigate through rather, and keep our clients' data safe. But it's also arguably an ethical duty that we have to innovate, and also we might die as a business as well. So it's interesting. What do you say to that person who sits as an executive, lawyer, or a board member who thinks that, and thinks that maybe the company's missing something by not being more open?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We just, as you know, we did a talk. My partner did a talk here yesterday. David Kirk, he was the chief scientist architect at NVIDIA, created all the technology underlying generative AI, and we had him do a talk here yesterday and asked a lot of questions about this. What's really critical, and the one piece of information I would say, is be informed, because if you're not, you will be taken over by this. It's easy as humans, when we are uncomfortable with change or risk. It's oftentimes our knee-jerk reaction to push it away and say, I'm just not going to deal with this, because that's like a whole ball of something that I'm not going to understand. But the reality is, once you open that door and you do start to educate yourself, you realize it's not that complex. It's complex. I'm not saying I'm not diminishing the complexity of generative AI, but I'm just saying, if you think about it, what is generative AI? It's predicting the next word in a sentence based on everything in the past. So there are going to be limits, there are going to be and there are going to be benefits, right? And so understanding the foundation, and there's a lot of stuff written online about this. I have actually, if anyone wants to reach out, I have a cheat sheet I found, which I loved, which has all sorts of uses and applications of it in companies and so forth, and things you can think about and how you look at it, because I found that that's really necessary to think about how is it potentially impacting these different areas. And if you see that and you think that your company is missing the boat on that, then I would definitely encourage, in a very nice way, to suggest that you have a speaker at your board meeting, at the next board meeting. Invite a speaker who understands this, who can give the board an overview of where they see, the opportunity for your company to excel, and where they see the minefields. And then based on that board meeting, chances are there will be more of a groundswell to encourage the board to get more involved or be more thoughtful around it, because it is it seems overwhelming, but it's really not. And once you get somebody who's able to speak about it, and as long as they're not trying to sell you something, because when they try and sell you something, they want to make it more complicated so you get more scared, so you hire them. So what you want to do is have somebody, come who understands it and just say, look, here's the areas we think that you might take a closer look at. Here's the opportunities you might be missing. If you don't, and if you do, that's your choice. But, just to make people aware of, you have 5 million data points on X. What if, what you can do with that is this. So you can better target your customer. You can identify, you can have a growth of this much. Everybody is sensitive right now to revenue, right? I mean, it's a big issue. It's a world right now where the financial world is in flux. And so when everything is in flux, people kind of get scared and it's like a deer in the headlights. And so there's no movement in it. But the reality is we really need to be moving. We need to have revenue. Pandemic killed a lot of stuff. So it's important to make sure you increase your top line. So I think that kind of a conversation and just bringing a guest into the board to have that conversation is probably the best way to slide it in.
Awesome. And I think, so thank you for those suggestions. Also, you made mention of a cheat sheet, so we may come back to, and you offered to share it. If I'm like others who are listening, I'm like, oh, I'd like the cheat sheet.
Yes.
So I now go to Diane in a world where somewhat related to AI, cybersecurity, we cannot rest. It is not new, and it is yet ever changing, the risk. And so if you would, I know you've spent an immense amount of time in this area, if you would talk to us about what we should be thinking about.
Of course, yeah. I've worked in cybersecurity for the past 11 years, and I mentioned at the beginning that Barracuda is a cybersecurity company, but we are also a backup and archiver and data protection company, as well as an email protection company. So if you put in context the petabytes and petabytes of data and the literally millions of messages that Barracuda sees every day, there's really a heightened focus, at least, for me in my role, but I would submit for all general counsel on really understanding the type of data information that each company has, and the value of it, not just to the company, but the value of it to a threat actor. And so, the volume and sophistication of threats is just increasing, incredibly quickly, but so is the scope and span of bad actors. And so, a cyber attack is really going to be motivated by one of multiple factors, right? It's either going to be purely financially motivated. Sometimes it's politically motivated, and sometimes it's just state actor espionage related. And, when these attacks happen, it's really important that you quickly assess what is the motivation, not just so you can neutralize it, but so you can think ahead, again, where GCs are incredibly skilled about what do we need to do now to deal with the long tail of activity that's going to come from this attack, right? I think it's really important to know, and I think, it's gotten more so, not less so, that by the time a company finds out that there's an attack going on in their network or in their environment, that threat actor has been in there for weeks or months. And so they have scoped out your environment, in some cases, maybe better than you knew your environment, in terms of understanding what's connected where and where the valuable digital assets are to them for their goal, whether it be financial, political or state actor. And so, as a general counsel, and especially in the evolving role, and as we educate our boards, right, we have to have really realistic understanding of what can we do to mitigate the situation, and then what is the ongoing business impact of it, right? And we all know that the SEC is starting to take some action in this area to come out with some rules. They've been very aggressive lately, going after, from a litigation perspective, some of the people involved in the companies, which is a very interesting and maybe potentially scary trend, because in the heat of a cyber incident, it is very difficult to know exactly the way to go in all cases, right? And it's got to be someone now in the company responsible for assessing that risk and the disclosure responsibilities, whether you're public or private, because in the end, if you're going to get sued, you need to have sort of reacted in a way that was responsible, regardless of whether you're a public company or not. And so, one of the things that I think is really important, and I think the GC could help with, is to play that contrarian person and role in all of these investigations, right? Because we are the ones who are going to have to ultimately help guide the company through that. And so it's really important to have somebody who creates sort of a constructive dissonance in the process so that we don't miss anything along the way, right? Because we are going to have to disclose things. We are going to have to take more risks. We're going to have to guide our board and the rest of our leadership team through these incidents. And so we don't want to disclose misinformation. We don't want to portray a false set of confidence. But we also want to make sure that we protect the company and the brand long-term as well. And in every one of these cases, there's going to be a long tail impact, right? It may be a litigation, it may not be a litigation, but it's certainly going to be an impact on the company's brand and how they think about security as a go forward basis. So I feel like it's incumbent upon us in our changing role as general counsel to really understand this area at a much more deep level than we have in the past, and then be prepared to help guide the board through sort of a situation, because in many cases, even with boards getting more cyber expert focused, they still really don't understand the impact of what cybersecurity and data privacy means. So that's just a little bit of an overview in that area.
Yeah, Diane, I'm just imagining somebody who is now facing, let's just say, their first more significant, potentially public, but it's something big. And they know that what you just said is the right thing to do. And I'm picking particularly on contrarian and this constructive dissonance, I think you said, role. How do you let people know? I just want to let you know that you're going to see me in a uniform now for the next 6 weeks, and it is the contrarian uniform. And here's what that's going to look and feel like. And this is why I'm doing. I mean, do you let people know?
You do. And in fact, it doesn't have to be the general counsel, but you should have someone on the team. It's really easy when you're stressed and then you're in a crisis scenario to get a groupthink mentality, especially among your engineers and especially among the team that are sort of trying to defend against this threat actor and this threat, right? And so you quickly want to just get it done and get it resolved. And you almost need somebody whose job it is openly and transparently to say, well, what if we're wrong? What if we really haven't gotten, the full scope of this figured out? What if there really is, something in this particular environment that we haven't found yet? How do we know? Who's really tasked with double checking all of that, right? And I think it's actually a role that I've played and I've watched others play as well. It's actually truly appreciated if you do it in a transparent and collaborative and in sort of, again, a forward-thinking sort of way, and educating and coaching. And again, there's all those same skills, right? The team that's in the moment there as to, okay, you're going to get through with your part of this. Hopefully in the next few days, we'll be able to get to the kind of that containment state. There's a long list of things that have to go on. Let's make sure we've really got everything thought through and kind of questioning along the way. So it is a role that, we've used engineers to play as well. When we have, we pick one engineer and let them do it, especially in a very technical situation where, even though my background is computer science and I did start with a technical background, right? When you get deep into these problems, you don't want to go in, you don't want to get too far over your skis, right? But get somebody there who's willing to be that role so that, when you disclose to your customers, to the SEC, to wherever you have to disclose, you're disclosing the best information as quickly as possible and in a transparent way. But you got to get comfortable. And how are you going to get comfortable if you don't have sort of that, back and forth to make sure you've really engaged fully to understand the scope of the problem?
Well, you're very calm. You're making something sort of hard and scary sound easy. So thank you. I'm going to pause here for a moment. We have another question that I'd like to pose to the group, the third of three. but a lot of richness has been put out into the forum here. And Lisa, I'm going to pause for a moment and just ask if there are any follow-up questions for the panelists and something that they said, or perhaps there's an area of newness that you would like to address yourself or have the panel address, and truly want to hear from everybody. And I just, again, want to note that in the original list of attendees, which was robust and amazing, there were quite a few experienced directors, and if you have a viewpoint that you feel comfortable sharing, we're all ears on that as well. So I'm going to pause, and your mics are live if anybody has a comment, question, etc. I actually can see some friends and their wonderful faces, and I am not calling on you because you are my friend, but I would be curious about your views on these things. But if you have something you want to ask, feel free. However, I will move. Did I miss anybody? Let me just pause again. Okay. So I want to go to a subject, and again, I want to thank Lisa and Kate and Danielle from NACD. One of the many things they do so well is they ask members, and specifically this cohort that the crew has brought together. A theme keeps coming forward as it relates to I think the way Lisa characterized it was, having a seat at the table and talking about, do you have it, how you have it? If you feel like you don't, what can you do to influence that, maintain it? What does that look like? And so this is a theme that regularly comes up from our NACD members and other participants in this cohort. So I'm going to ask sort of a compound set of questions and then ask the panelists to speak to the one that you most want to address, or to all of them. But I'm just going to put some examples out there of what we hear from members on this subject. So the way that it's characterized is wanting to make sure that you're being valuable to the board and to the management committee, you as the chief legal officer, and that you establish yourself as a key figure in the direction of the company. So that's one way in which a member articulated it. And so I ask of the panel is, how do you think you should, a topic that you think that all companies and boards will be facing perhaps in 2024 and beyond that is maybe not getting enough attention? Feel free to share something that maybe we haven't hit on yet, and how to ensure that it's on the agenda, be it the executive agenda and or the board's agenda as well. And help us with how you would frame it. So Diane gave an example of how she and others might articulate the role they're going to play in the event of a breach. How are you going to raise what might be a sensitive subject and make sure that it is welcome? And additionally, and related, I think, to this is, how do you as a director or executive continue to educate yourself? AI is probably a very good example, in order to continue to contribute at the highest levels and be viewed as a strategic person. So there's a lot there. I'm going to go back to you, Elizabeth, to react to what your counsel is as it relates to this achieving and maintaining that seat at the table.
Sure. So I think that what's really key for a CLO or GC to have the seat at the table, a trusted seat at the table, is helping to be the strategic advisor and business enabler. But you also need to be the person that can see around the corners and maybe tell the CEO the things that no one else is saying. Really helping to identify the problems that you see. I mean, especially if you're in the middle of a new issue for the business or a business transition. Sometimes people can be very enthusiastic about moving forward, and you need to while enabling the business, also help people see the risks in a constructive manner. So I think if you can show that you are both an enabler but also a risk seer, that's really critical, because you're probably one of the only people at the table that can play that role. So I think it's important that you do that. And it's especially important when you're in a position where perhaps your business is changing, you're encountering a crisis, or there's something unknown that you're facing, and it's not just the day-to-day challenges.
Absolutely. And I just, I really like this, the business enabler phrase. As some of you know, I also have the privilege of informally, but quite actively, not only helping place women and people on public and private company boards, but also I get in the mix, pretty deep in the mix of helping place chief legal officers in their next role, and they're often women. And when you talk to the CEO and others, the first thing they say, particularly if it's an earlier stage company, it's their first general counsel, and they say, "I want the opposite of a business interruption department." So, but no surprise to any of you. Also this notion, Elizabeth, and I can imagine you doing it, but it can be quite uncomfortable for many of us. Myself included. Actually, I have a new managing partner and CEO who's awesome. And I have found myself saying to him, one of the things that I've observed about a CEO and the challenge in the role is people stop talking to you. So may I be that person who from time to time raises things that you otherwise would have heard in a different role when you were maybe closer to the business and kind of in the mud in a way. And yeah, I hope that, I don't know if that's helpful to somebody, but that has for me in my roles been if framing it that way, that I have an obligation to and desire to elevate good, bad, ugly, everything in between, that I think rises to the level of the CEO needing to hear in order to do his or her job. I wanted to thank, it was Pam Martinson, who just was reinforcing that she serves as a chief legal officer and a director, and that she believes being a business advisor is really the most favorite part of her job. So thank you for that. She put her comment in the chat. And then we have a question from Alpna from NACD in DC. How far along is regulations with the AI's aggressive inclusion with cybersecurity as a continuous threat as well? Are boards really equipped yet? So what do you think? Our board, great, thank you. What do you think, Michelle, Diane, and then thoughts on that? Are we ready?
So Diane's probably going to be the best source on the cybersecurity question piece. In terms of the AI aggressive inclusion, I think the challenge we have again, and not to sound like broken record, is that people don't understand it, so they're not able to think around corners. So the more we can do to educate people on what exactly it is and how it works, really enables the board to think more around those corners to be more ready. I don't think we are ready right now, but again, the fallback has been, I'm just not going to do anything because I don't know what to do. And that's also not going to be a very good answer, because those companies, the world, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, every company is now a technology company and a data company. And if you don't have that love or that layer of sophistication over your underlying business, you're not going to be competitive. It's really more a competitive concern than anything. So, but Diane can do the cybersecurity piece.
No, I agree with you completely, Michelle. And I guess what I would say is we've thought a lot about it as well. But AI has been around for a long time, so we should just remember that, right? It has been, and it's been integrated into our companies for many years. The difference is it's been integrated into an engineering team and a bunch of data scientists who were sort of isolated, and you could kind of wall off and make sure that they were following a certain level of ethical integrity, data protection, cybersecurity, and other kind of, practices, because it was contained. What ChatGPT was brought generative AI, a very aggressive and an exciting form of AI, to the masses overnight. And that's why I think we all got sort of taken aback and all recoiled a little bit, like, what does this really mean from a corporate perspective and, from a personal perspective as well, right? So we spent a lot of time just immediately putting in place a usage policy, right? And putting some guardrails around how we're going to use it, because we knew even if we wanted to slow it down, it wasn't going to happen, right? So you can be ready. I would say the easiest thing to do is think about, we did high risk uses, we did sort of low risk uses, and we also did sort of no risk uses right now. Like, we just don't want you to go there and use AI for this purpose right now while we rein in it a little bit and understand it better. And a lot of it was related to the data and the information and whether it stayed within our control and how accurate did we believe it was, and was there going to need to be a human review of what came out of it, right? So we put these policies in place, we educated the management team, and then we've shared that up as well to the board as a way to just understand, like, this is how we're thinking about our AI strategy right now. So are we fully ready? No, I think our policy, this is a policy we put in place. And unlike a policy maybe that you put in place and check it again in a year, we talk about it every 3 months. That's how quickly we feel this world is changing. And, we can, kind of play catch up. And I think we're going to be, given what ChatGPT did and sort of, democratizing AI to everyone, right? Great opportunity. I do think we can be ready. We do have to get ahead of it as much as we can, and that's what we should all try to do.
Absolutely. And, Diane, listening to you, I'll just share an observation from hanging out with directors and other leaders on governance and excellence and board service, that boards are stopping and doing, if they haven't done it recently, or an skills assessment around the table to make sure that they've identified people who have relevant skills. More and more, as Michelle had mentioned, people are bringing in outsiders who are not in sales, but somebody that they respect, to suggest a framework, to share the types of questions you want to be asking that is going to drive excellence in terms of performance of the board and the interests of the shareholder. The other thing that I was going to say, I've heard a lot of people say, Diane, is that there used to be this annual review with respect to certain key areas of the business, and now it is on the board agenda quarterly. And I know I'm not saying anything that you and probably our members and participants haven't heard before, but just in case, I thought I'd reinforce some of those themes. So we have had a few other questions in the chat, which I think we will come back to in a moment, but I wanted to revisit the initial question as it relates to seat at the table and counsel you have for somebody who, for whatever reason, is not feeling like she's in the center of the boat in the conversation, or other issues you think boards should be ready to address. So Diane, I'll go back to you with that general question to help coach folks who aren't feeling it.
Yeah, I actually thought that, the feedback we got from Elizabeth is really right. It's really about being that trusted business advisor. And I think for me to get to the seat at the table, right, it's really, two things probably, right? It's taking every opportunity to really understand the business at a much deeper level so that you can be that end-to-end thinker and see what's coming around the corner. And, a business advisor doesn't wait. As a business partner, you don't wait for someone to come to you. You go out and talk to them, right? So I invite myself to QBRs. I invite myself to other meetings that, maybe a traditional legal role wouldn't have been in, right? Because if they see you and they see you're interested, right, then they will come to you more naturally in a way that's not like when there is a problem or at the tail end of something. And so I just really think it's so important to just go out there and sort of, that's what a business partner would do, right? And sort of, it's sort of like from the old law firm days, right? You wait for them to call you. No, you really need to be out there. And then, I've also just tried really hard, and I think it's really important for everyone to think about doing this, is I've built a strong network of women experts in areas that I'm not, that I can call on. And I then, I'm always available for them to call on me. And, sometimes it just gets you that extra courage or that extra confidence to kind of get involved in something. If you have someone that you can call up and say, I really need to understand AI, or I really need to understand what exactly is this. And, they've then helped me be ready to be a better business partner. So I really encourage that as well. And I think it's a two-way proposition. And if you do that, I think it really will help you feel you have everything you need to have that seat at the table. And at the same time, you'll be helping advance their career, which, like Catherine, is something I've done a lot in my career, is try to bring up women leaders and develop them to take on more and more responsibility in companies.
That you have, and I myself included, and I can't resist the opportunity to thank you publicly for that. And also having a sounding board. Sometimes we just need hear ourselves say something out loud, because we actually do know best, and we just need somebody to bear witness and say, go do that. Yes. So Michelle, would you share some thoughts on all of this as well?
Sure. I think that what Diane just mentioned about having a group of friends that are experts are really important. The way I would utilize that is I would, reach out to them and say, what are you reading? What do what should I be looking at? What are the main issues you see in these areas, and follow those. And then what I would do is I would do what I do sometimes. I put together some of these resources and share them with the board, each board member, and say, I was reading some of the stuff, very interesting, would love to hear your thoughts. And here's a little bit, or I saw this really interesting, I put this together because I was really interested in this topic, I would love your input on it if you, so be that provider of information and thought leadership to the members of the board consistently, and things to look out for and things to be aware of. And because at the end of the day, who are you most ingratiated to? Those that help you do your job better, right? And make you shine. So if you are the facilitator of that, you become an invaluable member. And then that's who people would like on their board with them, because they would like that in a more formal role. So I think that's an important way to make sure that you're out in front and providing value.
I love the way you put that. I've always,
And bring data to the table. I always say that's
and
bring data.
bring data.
For women, it's critical, because women, it's like, oh, it's your opinion. No, it's not really my opinion. There's like only, so especially when you're dealing with men, bring data and helpful.
Yeah, that is a very good reminder. I agree with that. So we have 5 minutes, and does anybody have a burning question, thought that they want to share? And I'm going to our audience and participants to just see, again, really appreciate, we have an incredible lineup of people who joined us and stayed for the program. Anything that anyone like to offer or ask before we sum up? Very well. I heard from each panelist many good reminders, and Elizabeth reminds us to be forward thinking. And when she was talking about her business strategy, she talked about the company's business strategy 10 and 20 years out, which I thought was super cool, which I think is also in keeping with another theme that she reminds us all, regardless of your political views, there is an important focus on energy transition, sustainability, and becoming carbon neutral, that we all play a part wherever, whatever type of company we sit. And for Michelle, I think that you remind us to think like a business person first, and being trained as a lawyer is, of course, I think, a gift to be in any room, including as a director. And again, we see this happening more and more. But I like the way that you also were beginning to give us a framework, and I think a lot of us would be interested in hearing more. And there are some questions in the chat, and maybe we'll go deep again on AI for a future topic. But I heard you talk about having that internal framework as to how you utilize, and to Diane's point, we've been utilizing AI very to the benefit of our businesses for a long time. And then what does that framework look like externally? And then we've had this acceleration and excitement, particularly around ChatGPT and others. So thank you for giving a steady hand, Michelle, to all of us. That's kind of one of the things that I'm taking away. And Diane, your focus on being a great leader was something that you're reminding us, and how that plays out through the organization, and understanding the value that we bring to the table. And you've talked about human resources and all the things that functional areas that I believe general counsels are so naturally well qualified to oversee, to step into. We see it happening more and more. But I haven't heard lawyers talk about joining a QBR as a guest. And forgive my ignorance, because I imagine that's probably happening in a lot of places, but wow, would the salespeople love, I think, to see the lawyers show up in those environments. So I just thought that was really smart, among many of the other things that you shared.